The easiest person to defeat is the one who believes they already know the truth. Ryan Whitmore believed he had already won. The courtroom doors opened slowly as he stepped inside, his polished shoes echoing across the marble floor. At 44 years old, Ryan had spent decades mastering the art of control. As a successful corporate attorney, he knew how to build arguments, negotiate deals, and find weaknesses others missed. He trusted documents. He trusted signatures. He trusted the power of the law. And today, he believed the law was on his side. Across the courtroom, Claire Bennett sat quietly at the table opposite him. She did not look nervous. She did not look angry. She simply held a small folder in her hands and waited. That bothered Ryan more than he expected, because this was not the Claire he remembered. The woman he divorced years ago had once looked at him with uncertainty. She had once searched his face for reassurance. She had once believed that if they worked hard enough, they could build a future together. But the woman sitting across from him now carried something different. Not bitterness. Not desperation. Confidence. Ryan adjusted his suit jacket and glanced toward his attorney. "Everything is prepared," his lawyer whispered. Ryan nodded. It was. The lawsuit was simple. At least, that was what he told himself. According to Ryan, Claire had violated the agreement they signed after their divorce. A deal was a deal. That was the foundation of his argument. He was not there for revenge. He told himself he was there for fairness. He wanted what the agreement promised. And he believed Claire was the only thing standing in his way. The judge entered the courtroom, and everyone stood. The room fell silent. After the formal introductions, the judge looked through the case file. "Mr. Whitmore," the judge said, "you are claiming that Ms. Bennett breached the terms of your agreement?" "Yes, Your Honor." Ryan's voice was calm. "Certain. She knowingly violated the terms we both accepted." The judge looked toward Claire. "Ms. Bennett, how do you respond?" Claire slowly stood. For a moment, Ryan expected emotion, an explanation, maybe even an apology. Instead, she simply answered, "I did not break the agreement, Your Honor." Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the room. Ryan watched her carefully. That was not the response of someone caught in a mistake. That was the response of someone who had been waiting. The judge looked down at the documents. "Do you have evidence supporting that claim?" Claire glanced at the folder in front of her. "Yes." One word. Nothing more. Ryan almost smiled. He had prepared for this moment. He had reviewed every page, every clause, every signature. He knew exactly what the agreement said, or at least, he believed he did. The judge reached for the documents. "Before we proceed," the judge said, "I want to clarify one thing." The courtroom became completely silent. This court is not only interested in what was written. A pause. It is interested in what was actually agreed upon. For the first time that morning, Ryan felt a small hesitation. Because Claire was not fighting the contract. She was trusting it. And as the judge began reviewing the pages, Ryan realized something uncomfortable. Maybe the person who misunderstood the agreement was not Claire. Maybe it was him. The most dangerous mistake in any agreement is believing you understand every word on the page. The courtroom remained silent after Claire Bennett's answer. "I did not break the agreement, Your Honor." 5 simple words. No anger. No hesitation. No attempt to defend herself with emotion. And somehow, that bothered Ryan Whitmore more than an argument would have. Because Ryan understood conflict. He understood accusations. He understood people who became nervous when challenged. But Claire was different. She sat across from him with the same calm expression she had carried since entering the courtroom, as if she was not fighting for her reputation. As if she already knew the truth would speak for itself. Ryan leaned back slightly in his chair. He studied her carefully. Years ago, he could read every emotion on her face. He knew when she was worried. He knew when she was overwhelmed. He knew when she needed reassurance. But the woman sitting across from him now felt like someone he had never truly met. The judge opened the agreement placed before him. "Mr. Whitmore, this case appears to be centered around the interpretation of the divorce settlement." "Yes, Your Honor," Ryan replied. His confidence returned. This agreement was clear. Both parties signed it. Ms. Bennett accepted the terms. The judge looked toward Claire. "Is that not correct?" Claire nodded slowly. "I signed it." Ryan almost relaxed. That was the answer he expected. The agreement existed. The signatures existed. The facts seemed simple. But then Claire continued. "I also followed it." The courtroom became still. Ryan looked at her. "What does that mean?" Claire turned toward him. Her expression remained calm. It means you are focusing on one part of the agreement while ignoring the rest. Those words stayed in the air. Ryan's attorney immediately stood. Your Honor, we believe the respondent is attempting to reinterpret a legally binding document. The judge raised a hand. Then we will examine the document carefully. Ryan watched as the judge reviewed the pages again. Every line, every section, every signature. For the first time, the agreement he believed he knew began to feel unfamiliar. And that feeling bothered him, because Ryan built his career on details. He was the person who found hidden meanings in contracts. He was the person clients trusted to see what others missed. Yet now, sitting in that courtroom, he wondered if he had missed something himself. A memory appeared in his mind. The night they signed the agreement. The room had been quiet. The divorce had already taken everything from them emotionally. Claire sat across from him with tired eyes. She had not fought for revenge. She had not demanded more than she deserved. She simply wanted fairness. At the time, Ryan believed that meant she had accepted defeat. Now he was not so sure. The judge turned another page. Ms. Bennett, are you claiming there is additional information regarding this agreement? Claire looked at the folder beside her. Yes, Your Honor. What kind of information? Claire placed her hand gently on the documents. The information that explains why this agreement was written the way it was. Ryan's expression changed, because that was the first time he realized something. Claire was not challenging the contract. She was revealing the story behind it. And suddenly, the lawsuit he believed would prove she was wrong began to feel like something else entirely. A question he had never asked. What if Claire had not broken their deal? What if he had misunderstood it from the beginning? The most dangerous lies are not the ones people tell others. They are the ones they tell themselves until the truth finally appears. The courtroom grew quieter as Claire Bennett's attorney placed the agreement back on the table. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Ryan Whitmore looked at the document in front of him. The same document he had studied countless times. The same document he believed would prove Claire was wrong. But now, for the first time, he wondered if he had only been reading the parts that supported his own belief. The judge looked toward Claire. Ms. Bennett, you stated that this agreement contains additional context. Please explain. Claire slowly opened her folder. Inside were copies of emails, financial records, and notes from the months before their divorce was finalized. Ryan noticed the documents immediately, not because they were surprising, because they looked familiar. Some of them had passed through his hands years ago. He simply never considered them important. That agreement was created after years of decisions we made together, Claire said. Her voice remained steady. It was not only about what each person received after the marriage ended. It was also about recognizing what each person contributed during the marriage. Ryan's attorney stood. Your Honor, the agreement clearly states the responsibilities of both parties. The judge nodded. And we will examine those responsibilities completely. The attorney sat down. Ryan felt a slight discomfort. He knew that tone. A judge did not speak that way unless something required closer attention. Claire looked at the pages. Then she looked toward Ryan. When we signed this agreement, you asked me to trust the process. Ryan's expression changed slightly, because he remembered. It was true. After years of conflict, both of them wanted the divorce to end peacefully. Ryan had told her that the agreement was fair, that everything had been considered, that there was no reason to continue fighting. At the time, Claire believed him. She believed fairness meant both people were being seen. But later, she realized something. Being included in a conversation was not the same as being recognized in the outcome. The judge examined one of the documents. Ms. Bennett, what is the significance of this record? Claire took a breath. This shows that certain business assets mentioned in the agreement were developed using work and resources contributed by both parties. Ryan looked up sharply. Those were my business assets. The words came out before he could stop them. The courtroom became still. Claire did not react. She simply looked at him. And that silence reminded Ryan of something he had forgotten. Claire had never fought him with anger. She fought by remembering details. The judge turned toward Ryan. Mr. Whitmore, did Ms. Bennett participate in the development of these assets? Ryan hesitated, only for a moment, but everyone noticed. She assisted, he answered. Claire lowered her eyes. Assisted, a single word. A word that reduced years of effort into something smaller. The judge looked back at the documents. Sometimes the difference between assistance and contribution is not the work itself. A pause. It is whether that work was acknowledged. Ryan felt the room change. Because the lawsuit was no longer about whether Claire broke a deal. It was becoming about whether he had ever truly understood the deal in the first place. He looked at Claire again, the woman he remembered as someone who stood behind him, the woman he thought had walked away with less. But now, sitting in that courtroom, he began seeing another possibility. Maybe Claire had not lost anything. Maybe she had simply stopped allowing others to overlook what she had always given. And somewhere inside the pages of that agreement was the truth Ryan had never bothered to find. The truth is rarely hidden forever. Sometimes, it is simply waiting for the right person to finally read the entire story. The courtroom lights reflected across the polished wooden table as Claire Bennett placed another document in front of the judge. Ryan Whitmore watched silently. For the first time since filing the lawsuit, he was no longer focused on proving Claire wrong. He was trying to understand how he could have missed something so important. The judge carefully reviewed the additional records. These documents appear to show a different timeline than the one presented in the original claim. Ryan's attorney immediately leaned forward. "Your Honor, we believe those documents require proper interpretation." The judge nodded. "And that is exactly what this court intends to do." The response was calm, professional, but it carried a message everyone in the room understood. The court was no longer accepting assumptions. It was looking for the truth. Ryan looked toward Claire. She remained composed. No satisfaction. No expression of victory. That bothered him. Because if Claire had been trying to defeat him, he could understand. If she had been angry, he could have defended himself. But she was not fighting him. She was simply presenting facts. And facts were becoming harder to argue against. The judge examined a financial record attached to the agreement. "Ms. Bennett, this document references several contributions made before the final settlement was signed. Can you explain these?" Claire nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." She paused briefly. "Before our divorce, Ryan and I built several things together. Some contributions were financial. Others were operational. Some were decisions made behind the scenes." Ryan looked down. Behind the scenes. Those words stayed with him. Because he remembered those years. He remembered the growth, the success, the moments when people congratulated him for building something impressive. But he also remembered Claire sitting beside him late at night, reviewing plans, organizing information, solving problems before anyone else noticed. At the time, he believed those moments were simply part of marriage. He never considered them part of the foundation. The judge turned another page. "Mr. Whitmore, did you dispute these contributions at the time the agreement was created?" Ryan hesitated. No, the answer was quiet. But it was honest. The judge looked up. "Then why are they being disputed now?" The question created a silence Ryan could not escape. Because the answer was uncomfortable. He had not questioned Claire's contributions back then. He was questioning them now because recognizing them changed the outcome. And for the first time, he saw the difference. The agreement had never been the problem. The problem was the meaning he had assigned to it. Ryan looked at Claire. Years ago, he believed she was asking for fairness because she needed something from him. Now he realized she had never been asking for permission. She had been asking for recognition. The judge continued reviewing the documents. There appears to be evidence that both parties understood the nature of this agreement differently. Ryan's attorney remained silent. Claire's attorney did not celebrate. Nobody did. Because the room was not witnessing a victory. It was witnessing a correction of a story that had been incomplete for years. Claire closed her folder. The movement was simple, almost ordinary. But Ryan noticed something. She was not nervous about what would happen next. She already knew who she was. The courtroom was only discovering it. And as the judge prepared to review more evidence, Ryan faced a realization he never expected. He had filed a lawsuit believing Claire broke their deal. But the deeper question was becoming impossible to ignore. Had Claire broken the agreement? Or had Ryan spent years misunderstanding what he agreed to? The hardest truth to accept is not that someone betrayed you. It is realizing you were the one who failed to see their value. The courtroom remained silent as the judge continued reviewing the agreement. Ryan Whitmore sat still, but his confidence was no longer the same. The lawsuit he filed was supposed to be simple. A broken deal. A clear violation. A straightforward case. That was the story he told everyone. That was the story he told himself. But now, every new document revealed another piece of a past he had chosen not to examine. The judge placed one page on the table. This section appears to reference responsibilities shared by both parties before the divorce. Ryan's attorney leaned forward. "Your Honor, Those responsibilities were part of the marriage arrangement, not necessarily part of the settlement agreement. The judge looked at him. Then why are they specifically mentioned here? The attorney paused. No answer came immediately. Ryan noticed, and that silence bothered him, because lawyers like his did not hesitate without a reason. Across the courtroom, Claire remained calm. She watched the conversation unfold without interruption. Years ago, Ryan would have interpreted that silence differently. He would have thought she was afraid. He would have believed she had nothing to say. But now, he was beginning to understand something. Claire's silence was not emptiness. It was preparation. The judge turned another page. Ms. Bennett, this agreement includes references to business development, financial planning, and operational decisions made during the marriage. Claire nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Were these activities performed by you? Yes. Were they recognized during the creation of this agreement? Claire paused. For a while, I thought they were. The answer was quiet, but it carried weight. Ryan looked at her, because that sentence revealed something he had never considered. Claire was not saying the agreement was unfair. She was saying something deeper. She was saying she had believed he understood. The memory returned. Their first years together. Before the success. Before the money. Before people knew Ryan's name. Claire was there when everything was uncertain. She helped organize his early business plans. She reviewed information before meetings. She handled problems while Ryan focused on opportunities. Back then, they were a team. At least, that was what she believed. But somewhere along the way, Ryan began separating their achievements. His success, her support, his career, her sacrifice. The difference seemed small at the time. But years later, it became the reason they were sitting across from each other in court. The judge looked toward Ryan. Mr. Whitmore, did you consider Ms. Bennett's involvement valuable when these decisions were made? Ryan opened his mouth, then stopped, because the honest answer was complicated. Yes, he valued her, but he never measured her value correctly. Yes, he finally said. The courtroom remained quiet. The judge nodded. Then this court must determine why those contributions are now being described differently. Ryan looked down at the table. For the first time, he saw the problem clearly. He had not sued Claire because she broke the agreement. He sued her because the agreement no longer supported the version of the story he wanted to believe. The judge continued reviewing the evidence. There are additional records that may clarify this matter. Claire's attorney placed another folder forward. Ryan watched carefully. He expected another argument, another accusation. Instead, he saw something much more powerful. Proof, not created to destroy him, created to reveal what had been overlooked. And as the folder opened, Ryan realized the case was changing. Not because Claire had found a way to fight harder, but because she had finally found a way to be heard. The truth does not hurt because it is cruel. It hurts because it reveals what someone refused to see for years. The courtroom remained silent as Claire Bennett's attorney opened the final folder. Inside were documents that had been carefully preserved for years. Emails, business records, financial reports, small pieces of a much larger story. Ryan Whitmore watched every movement. He had built his career by noticing details, by finding weaknesses, by understanding what people missed. But now, sitting across from Claire, he was facing something he never expected. The details he overlooked were not hidden from him. They were simply ignored. The judge examined the first document. This record shows that Ms. Bennett participated in the early planning stages of these business ventures. Ryan's attorney reviewed the page. Yes, Your Honor, but participation does not automatically create ownership. The judge nodded. Correct. A pause. But participation can establish contribution. Those words changed the atmosphere. Because the case was no longer about whether Claire signed the agreement. She had. It was no longer about whether she followed the terms. She had. The real question was becoming clearer. What did those terms actually recognize? Claire looked toward the judge. When we created that agreement, the purpose was not to erase the past. Her voice remained calm. It was to acknowledge it. Ryan looked at her. That sentence stayed with him. Because he remembered the divorce negotiations. He remembered wanting everything finalized quickly. He remembered being exhausted by the arguments. He remembered believing that once the paperwork was signed, the difficult chapter would disappear. But Claire remembered something different. She remembered the conversations before the documents. The promises. The discussions about what they built together. The understanding that their lives had been connected long before their names appeared on separate papers. The judge reviewed another document. This email appears to show communication regarding business decisions made jointly by both parties. Ryan recognized the email. He remembered sending it. He remembered asking Claire for her opinion. But back then, he did not call it a partnership. He called it help. A small difference. A difference that now carried enormous weight. The judge looked at Ryan. Mr. Whitmore, did Ms. Bennett provide input on these decisions? Ryan remained silent for several seconds. Yes. The answer was quiet. But I did not believe it changed the ownership structure. Claire looked down. Not because she disagreed. Because that was exactly the problem. Ryan had measured everything through ownership. Who signed? Who was listed? Whose name appeared first? But Claire had measured something else. Contribution. Commitment. The years spent building something before anyone knew its value. The judge closed the document. This court must consider not only the language of the agreement, but also the circumstances surrounding its creation. Ryan felt a shift inside him. For the first time, he was not thinking like a lawyer. He was thinking like the person who had lived through those years. He remembered Claire staying late while he prepared presentations. He remembered her, organizing details that allowed him to focus on opportunities. He remembered saying, "I couldn't have done this without you." Back then, he meant it emotionally. Now he understood the legal meaning behind those words. The courtroom remained quiet, but something had already changed. Ryan entered this case believing Claire was trying to take something from him. Now he realized she was only asking for something that had always been hers. Recognition. And as the judge continued reviewing the evidence, Ryan faced the truth he had avoided for years. The agreement was never broken. The misunderstanding was. The moment someone realizes they were wrong is not always the moment they admit it. Sometimes, it is the moment they finally have no choice but to face the truth. The courtroom felt different now. The confidence that filled the room when Ryan Whitmore first filed the lawsuit had disappeared. The case he believed would prove Claire Bennett had broken their agreement had transformed into something else entirely. A closer examination of everything they had built together. The judge reviewed the final pieces of evidence placed before him. These records indicate that Ms. Bennett's involvement was not incidental. Ryan sat quietly. That word stayed with him. Not incidental. For years, he had described Claire's role exactly that way. Helpful, supportive, important, but secondary. Now the court was looking at those same years differently. The judge continued. The evidence suggests that both parties relied on each other's efforts during the development of these assets. Ryan's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, we maintain that the agreement's language should remain the primary consideration. The judge looked toward him. And it will be. A pause. But an agreement cannot be understood by ignoring the circumstances that created it. The room became silent again. Ryan looked down at the document. The same pages that once gave him confidence now felt unfamiliar. Because he finally noticed something. The agreement never said Claire contributed nothing. It never said she had no role. It never erased the years before the divorce. He had done that himself. A memory appeared in his mind. A quiet evening years earlier. Their apartment was filled with papers and unfinished plans. Ryan was preparing for an important business meeting. Claire sat across from him, reviewing information and pointing out a mistake in one of his projections. He remembered laughing. Not because she was wrong. Because he believed she was being overly cautious. You worry about everything, he had told her. Claire smiled. Someone has to. At the time, he thought it was just a simple comment. Now he understood what it really meant. Someone had been paying attention when he was too focused on moving forward. The judge looked toward Claire. Ms. Bennett, why did you wait until this lawsuit to present these records? The courtroom waited for her answer. Claire looked at Ryan for a moment. Not with anger. Not with disappointment. Just honesty. Because I never wanted a fight, Your Honor. She paused. I wanted the agreement to be respected. Ryan felt those words more deeply than he expected. Because Claire was not asking the court to punish him. She was not asking anyone to see him as the villain. She was simply asking for the truth to be acknowledged. The judge reviewed the documents one final time. This court finds that the claim of a broken agreement requires further consideration. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. The case was no longer about proving Claire wrong. It was about accepting that he might have been wrong himself. Across the room, Claire gathered her papers. Her movements were calm, certain. She was not waiting for Ryan to apologize. She was not waiting for him to finally understand. She had already moved beyond needing that. And that realization affected him more than losing the lawsuit ever could. Because Ryan began to understand something painful. Claire had not become stronger because she defeated him. She became stronger because she stopped needing him to recognize her strength. The judge prepared to deliver the final review. And for the first time since this began, Ryan was not afraid of losing. He was afraid of realizing how much he had failed to see. The truth does not always arrive with a dramatic moment. Sometimes it arrives quietly, piece by piece, until there is nowhere left for denial to hide. The courtroom was silent as the judge prepared to deliver the final decision. Ryan Whitmore sat at the table, his hands resting together. For the first time since the lawsuit began, he did not look like a man preparing to win. He looked like someone waiting to understand. The judge reviewed the final documents one more time. The court has carefully examined the agreement, the supporting records, and the circumstances surrounding its creation. A pause. The evidence does not support the claim that Ms. Bennett violated the agreement. The words settled over the courtroom. Claire remained still. No smile. No celebration. No expression of victory. She simply closed her eyes for a brief moment and exhaled. Not because she had defeated Ryan. Because she had finally been heard. Ryan looked down. The sentence he expected to hear had disappeared. For weeks, he had prepared himself to prove Claire was wrong. He had gathered evidence. He had built arguments. He had convinced himself that the truth was on his side. But the truth had never been his enemy. His misunderstanding was. The judge continued. The agreement was not broken. However, the court recognizes that the interpretation presented by Mr. Whitmore failed to consider the full context of the arrangement. Ryan felt the weight of those words. Not a punishment. Not an attack. Just an acknowledgement. He had looked at the agreement as a weapon. Claire had looked at it as a promise. And that difference changed everything. The judge explained that Claire had acted within the terms they both accepted. The evidence showed that she had not taken something that belonged to Ryan. She had protected something that had always been recognized as hers. The courtroom remained professional and quiet. No dramatic reactions. No emotional confrontation. Just a decision based on facts. After the hearing ended, people slowly began leaving. Ryan stayed seated for a moment longer. He watched Claire organize her documents. The same calm movements. The same quiet confidence. The same person he had underestimated for years. Claire. She stopped and looked back. For a moment, they were no longer two people in a courtroom. They were two people remembering a life they once shared. I thought I understood what happened, Ryan said. His voice was softer than before. I thought you were trying to take something from me. Claire looked at him. I never wanted anything that wasn't mine. The simplicity of her answer affected him. Because it was true. She never came after him. She never tried to destroy his reputation. She never wanted revenge. She only wanted the truth to exist. Ryan lowered his eyes. I should have seen it. Claire remained quiet. Not because she was angry. Because she had already made peace with the fact that he had not. Years ago, she needed him to understand. Today, she no longer did. The difference was everything. I hope you find what you were looking for, Claire said. Ryan looked at her. What was that? She paused. Something beyond being right. Those words stayed with him. Because Ryan finally understood. Winning an argument was not the same as understanding the person standing across from you. The courtroom doors opened. Claire walked toward the exit with steady steps. The case was over. The agreement was settled. The truth had been recognized. And Ryan was left with the most important lesson of all. The person he believed had broken their deal had actually been the one honoring it all along. The greatest victories are not the moments when someone loses. They are the moments when someone finally understands what they failed to value. Several months had passed since the courtroom doors closed behind Claire Bennett. The lawsuit that once threatened to define her life had become nothing more than a chapter she had already finished. But for Ryan Whitmore, the memory remained. Not because he lost. Not because the court ruled against him. Because the case forced him to see something he had spent years ignoring. Claire had never been the person standing in his way. She had been the person standing beside him. The morning after the final hearing, Claire returned to her office. It was a place she built after the divorce. Not from anger. Not from the desire to prove someone wrong. But from the simple need to create something that belonged entirely to her. Sunlight entered through the large windows. Employees moved through the hallway. Projects were being discussed. Ideas were being developed. A life was continuing. And Claire stood quietly for a moment, looking around. Years earlier, she never imagined she would be standing there. After the divorce, there were days when everything felt uncertain. Days when she wondered if starting over was possible. She had lost a marriage. She had lost the identity she carried for years. But she discovered something important. She had never lost herself. She had simply forgotten how strong she was. Across the city, Ryan sat inside his office. The same office where he once celebrated every achievement. The same place where he believed success was proof that he had made all the right choices. But now, the room felt different. The lawsuit was over. The documents were closed. Yet one question remained. How could he have spent so many years believing he understood Claire when he never truly listened? He opened an old file from the early years of their marriage. Inside were notes, plans, ideas Claire had written, small suggestions that later became important decisions. Ryan looked at the handwriting. The same handwriting he had seen thousands of times. The same person he had known for years. And suddenly, he understood the irony. The woman he thought needed his support had been supporting him all along. A week later, Ryan and Claire crossed paths one final time. Not in a courtroom, not across opposing tables. Just two people standing outside a quiet cafe. There was no argument, no tension, only a conversation that came too late. I spent a long time thinking I lost because of the lawsuit, Ryan said. Claire looked at him. And now? He paused. Now I think I lost because I never understood what I had. Claire remained silent for a moment. Not because she was hurt, because she had already accepted the past. Sometimes people recognize value only after they stop receiving it, she said. Ryan nodded. He knew she was right. But this time, he did not try to defend himself. He simply accepted it. Claire walked away with the same calm confidence she carried into the courtroom. The difference was that now, everyone understood what she already knew. Her victory was never about proving Ryan wrong. It was about proving to herself that she had always been enough. The agreement was honored. The truth was revealed. The lawsuit ended. But the most important change was never written in a document. It happened when Claire stopped waiting for someone else to recognize her worth. Because the strongest person in the room is not always the one who wins the argument. Sometimes, it is the one who walks away knowing exactly who they are.